welcome to this episode of Quake It Up. In this episode, I wanted to discuss the general election, which is coming to the UK. It's only happening in the UK on the 4th of July 2024. And just want to talk maybe a little bit about how Quakers react to general elections and elections more generally. Obviously, I'm focusing on the British one as a British Quaker, but obviously just elections generally, and the different Quaker positions on elections, and maybe specifically on this election, some thoughts from a Quaker perspective as well. Three things before getting started. Obviously, in this video, I'm not going to tell you who to vote, and I'm not going to say certainly that Quakers all must vote the same way. More on that later, but absolutely not. This is not meant to be a political broadcast in any way. This is just interesting facts about Quakers and elections, and maybe a Quaker flavour on this election. And secondly, I've been really impressed with what Quakers in Britain have produced for this general election. I think it's been really good, really helpful. I was wanting to do a video on elections and things, and this was really helpful because, and I think in terms of helping Quakers understand the political landscape from a Quaker perspective can be quite difficult, and I think they've really they've produced materials and provoking questions and advices in order to help us to do that. So what is the Quaker position on voting? What's the political life of a Quaker? I think it's something which is really important because a lot of what Quakerism asks of Quakers can be quite political. You know, when you think about a lot of important Quaker figures, a lot of them had very overtly political agendas. So you think of like John Woolman, maybe. I know Quakers have been lauded as, you know, really helping to promote things such as the abolition of slavery, prison reform, and things like that. So there is a strong political angle to Quakers, and we're certainly known for engaging with MPs and getting them to, or encouraging them to move towards policies which we think are important in the world. However, obviously, that's not to say that Quakers are all the same when it comes to political affiliation in any way. We've had members of Parliament who are from the Conservative Party. We've had members of Parliament who are in the Labour Party. The current co-leader of the Green Party is a Quaker. The current leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats is a Quaker. So we're all over the place. So it's not like, and I think this is a stereotype maybe that Quakers have, and we maybe need to counter as well, and maybe in the outside world as well, that, you know, Quakers are all left wing, and that's not true. So it's doing a bit of history as well as to like where how Quakers and elections have gone in the past, and especially looking at when the first Quaker MP came around. I was shocked because I just assumed that it was more. Well, there's a theoretical answer and there's an actual answer. So the theoretical answer is 1698, when John Archdale was elected leader. I think somewhere, I want to say Buckinghamshire or Hertfordshire. It is Buckinghamshire, but he couldn't take his seat. And this is an interesting time, obviously. So this is post Act of Toleration. So. And I kind of just, in my mind, Quakers was kind of, because we weren't allowed to go to universities and things, I just assumed we weren't allowed to be MPs either, but seemingly not. Seemingly the reason why we weren't able to be MPs was because of swearing an oath, which is what happened here. So in the UK, in order to take your seat, you need to swear an oath of loyalty to the government and to, well, at that time, the king. And Quakers don't take oaths, famously, because it sets a double standard of truth. So he couldn't take a seat. And so for a long time, until the 1800s, there were no Quaker MPs because of that reason. And I kind of thought it was because, well, maybe it was sort of, well, this is a handy way to keep the Quakers out, but I'm not necessarily sure if that was actively done. But certainly nothing was done to circumvent it. So then the real answer to the question was Joseph Pease, who became prime minister. Yeah, if I wish, came an MP for somewhere in Durham in 1832, and it was because of his election that the 1832 Reform Bill came in, and in there it was allowed that you didn't have to say an oath, you can say an affirmation, and Quakers are way happier with affirmation. We can affirm anything, we're all for affirming what we believe to be true. What we deny is that we can't. I'm not saying that I'm going to say that this is true now and that it wasn't true before I said it, or things like that. It's no, just not what we do. So that was great. So thank you, Joseph Pease. And from then, Quakers were allowed to could then become MPs, and they did. In terms of the 2024 elections, in terms of sitting members of Parliament who are Quakers who are seeking re-election, we've got Ruth Cadbury and Catherine West, who are both Labour candidates, and I'm sure there must be other candidates as well, but I don't know them. But there are certainly some Quakers who are looking for election, so excellent stuff. So I mentioned before that there are Quakers in Britain have put together a really good kind of array of material in order for us to look at and think about as we're approaching these elections. And in a quite helpful way, they're not trying to help us again say you must pick for this party, you must vote for this party, or we suggest even that you vote for this party. So the first thing that they produced, and this came out really quite early in the election campaign, is a guide to Quakers on the upcoming general election. And so they kind of go in why it's important and what is a general election. They gave obviously the key dates for things like registering to vote and getting photo ID, which we need now. And what they did is, instead of focusing entirely on all the classic testimonies, instead what they do is that they've chosen four main areas which they think are really key for Quakers to be focusing on in this election, and those are democracy, climate justice, peace, and migration. Because I think they're the things which are quite prevalent in this election, and also I think there are things that Quakers really care about. So I'll put links to these down below, and I really would recommend you checking them out. They've been certainly very helpful for me, because especially because in the British system. So for those overseas listeners, viewers, however you're listening or viewing this, in Britain we run a first past the post system where basically in every constituency, say Labour got 300,000 votes and Conservatives got 299,999, whatever, so one vote less. The MP for that region would be a Labour voter, and all those 299,999 votes count for nothing, effectively. Because of that, I think probably more than if we had a proportional representation system, tactical voting is much more common in the UK. So, if that's the case, if you're in a very tight run contest between two parties and you actually, if you look at the manifestos and maybe your personal background and personal beliefs and stuff, you preferred a third party, you've got a couple of options there. You could either stand by your morals and vote for the third party, or you can say, well, I really don't want that party, so I'm going to vote for the other party, not because I necessarily believe everything they say, but they're better than that and I want them to win. So that happens an awful lot. And there are websites and whole things that you can look at to help with tactical voting. And I have not been a stable voter, I would say. I have voted in various different ways, based on my conscience and based on the who's standing in my area, and what the party manifestos are and things like that. So this has been really helpful in helping me sort of narrow down what I need to look at, because you can read their manifestos if you wish, but they're long and complicated, and you might have better things to do with your day than read a really long manifesto. And so basically what they go for in each one of those four categories, they talk about why it matters, which might be a bit of an easy thing to think about, but maybe especially in terms of this election, what's the importance of democracy, what's the importance of climate change, doing things against climate change and so on, why is that important? And then it goes, what what are we calling for? So what do Quakers want to do in these certain things? So then you can look and say, well, okay, so what? So if someone comes knocking, you say, well, what are your views on this? Or what is the Conservative view on this? Or what is the Reform vote on the view on this? Or what is the Labour vote on idea on this? And then it has, in a classic Quaker way, some things to think about, some things maybe to take to meeting and discuss, thought-provoking things to help you suss out, well, what are your views on that matter as well. Second, really, I think, helpful document kind of fits in with this first one is basically Billy Vaughan, who works for Quakers in Britain, has basically gone through all the manifestos and done our work for us. So he's gone through them, not against all of those criteria, the four criteria in the first document, but looks at a couple of them in light of the manifestos and kind of talks about what each party is saying about each one. So again, the link will be in there, and I think that's really useful. I'd read the first one, then read that one, because then you can make a better informed decision from a Quaker perspective. So he looks at democracy, human rights, and migration as like his ones that he's really analysing, and he looks at all the major parties. Reform isn't in there. You can read into that what you will. Maybe there wasn't enough on those topics that they felt was fitting with Quaker beliefs. I think that's probably the in terms of maybe political statements of these documents, that might be something that's quite interesting. But they've got everyone else. So the SNP, Plaid Cymru are in there, Greens are in there, Lib Dems, so, all the other parties are in there, but Reform isn't in there. That might be actually when this was published, their manifesto hadn't come out. Maybe. An important thing that I actually haven't discussed is whether Quakers vote or not, which is obviously what's on the thumbnail of this video. So let's actually discuss that. Do Quakers vote? Well, I think probably most Quakers do. Obviously, I can't speak for any Quaker but myself and my general sort of assumptions and what I see other Quakers doing. I believe that probably most Quakers vote because we believe in social action, because we want to change the world, and in the current setup of the world, that is how you do it. So I would imagine that people do vote. There are some Quakers, though, who I know who don't vote, and they've got different reasons for doing that. So I know two, and their reasons are different. So one would say they don't vote because it's all dishonest. It's politicians and the system is inherently dishonest. They can, you can ask them anything, and they will say what they want to say instead of actually answering the question. So they don't want to participate in that because they think even in the way that we vote, as I mentioned in the first part of the post system, you're voting for this party, but your vote, unless you're in a battleground constituency, it might not matter. So where's the truth in that? I suppose is his point. And so he doesn't want to take part in it because he thinks from his Quaker belief in truth, he can't partake in a system which is inherently untruthful. And my other friend who doesn't vote would say that, and has Quaker reasons for not voting, would say that it's because that this basically it wants to partake as little in the state as possible because the state is upholding to beliefs that he doesn't believe are Quaker, such as nuclear armaments and proliferation of arms. So he says he can't, until governments aren't doing that, he cannot support any form of government and doesn't feel like he has the right, therefore, to vote. And so I think there are reasons, certainly, why Quakers don't vote, and which are from a Quaker informed position rather than just, not interested in politics, can't be bothered, that sort of thing. So I think there is certainly an angle of non-voting in Quakerism. I don't think it's the majority, though. I think what is important, though, is that we don't assume, because I think, as I said right at the beginning, I think there is an assumption that we all vote one way, and we don't. And I think when we're talking a meeting, and especially now with an election upcoming, I think we do need to be just a little bit careful in that we don't assume that everyone votes like we do, because we want to respect everyone. We want that everyone and their experiences and their journeys, and so we can't turn around and say that they're wrong. If we believe that there's that of God in everyone, and we believe that everyone has worth, then so do their opinions, and so we must listen. We must be, in the same way that we do when we disagree about maybe theological matters. We have to be respectful, and I think we are. But I think possibly we don't necessarily always expect to encounter different political views in meeting, and that can be difficult. So I think that would probably be my message. Just keep it. If you want to talk politics with someone, and they're happy, and you're happy to talk about, your maybe differing political views, then great. But I think otherwise, just keep it Quaker focused like this, because that way you're not saying you must vote this, you must vote that, you vote this way, that's terrible. You're just saying, well, Quakers are looking to uphold these things this year. Who do you think's, where do you think this is being done successfully amongst the different parties? Does this help? Is this unhelpful? That's a much better way, I think, of avoiding conflict in this time. So I hope that's been helpful, giving a brief idea of how Quakerism and Quakers and elections all fit together, and I'll see you for the next video.
Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up and the subscribe button to get more videos about Quakerism in the UK today. It really does help, and thanks once again.